massive movement on the cloud, which is now coupled to a movement of decentralization on the edge. And when you look at the world of energy, it was only a cloud, which is called the grid in our jargon. And now what is happening is a massive development of the edge, which are decentralized energy. You can manage more renewable only if they are digitized to manage the volatility and on the intermittency of those energies. And at the same time, you are able to deploy digital only if you have an impeccable and super reliable energy. So we see those two things not only as best friends, but actually as a very happy couple, and they develop together. So when you look at the big transition that we are facing in our industry, it's about smart everywhere. So distribution is getting definitely very smart around digitized grid and smart grid to manage all the new complexity which was described by the previous panel. And it's going to be massively more distributed with significant savings on the old infrastructure. And then the biggest part of the change has to be happening at the level of the end use, which is going to be digitized, which is the best way to efficiency or the most efficient path to efficiency. And it's going to be massively more electrified because today electricity is the only vector of consumption that enables mass decarbonization, right? So those are the two places where that transition is happening. So Fatih was starting this morning by saying it's not a thing of the future, it's a thing of the present. And I'd like just to testimony of that and share with you examples of what we do with our customers. Efficiency is not a futuristic thing. You can already obtain a lot by deploying existing efficiencies. And these are the sectors we address today in terms of efficiency. But let's start with a building in your country of origin, in Amsterdam. Well, without offense, my wife is Dutch, so Holland is not the sunniest place in the world, if I may. And this is one normal building which is not going with fancy technology that we did with Deloitte. It's called the Edge. And that's a completely energy positive building by combining energy efficiency with renewable generation on spot and storage. Moving on to other buildings, that the case of Auchan, distribution chain all over Europe, 20% targeted saving just by getting everything connected and applying simple analytics on what is happening, more than 10 million energy cost savings by end 2017. On those kind of projects, the payback is around 3 years. So speak about long-term investment, financing, small projects, payback within 3 years. Difficult to find a better investment in the industry today. And I would, by the way, concur and differ with Thorsten before. Every CEO in the world knows their IT budget to the decimal. Most of the CEOs don't know their energy spending to any kind of measurement. The potential of gains on the energy spending is much higher than what we do with the IT. Where I would differ is that I think many have started to address it and consider it as important. So now the other part of the equation, microgrids, so the deployment of grid on the edge, which in the US happened not for reason of efficiency, but for reason of resilience in front of the hurricanes and the power breakdowns that happen on the grid. And the fact is that when you deploy that, you have also saving on the cost of your energy. That's an example in Milton to supply energy to high-tech parks. Something we do with Enel on a quite large scale, which is the smart grid, which is absolutely necessary if you want to manage the intermittency of consumption and on renewable generation. And then we move to data centers. Data centers have an important brick of the digitization, and they need a perfectly reliable kind of energy. They have also a second characteristic that energy is the largest part of their cost. So if you want to be competitive in this industry, on one side you need a super reliable kind of energy, but at the same time you need to be efficient because that's your main source of cost. So that's one example in Asia of 100% power uptime guaranteed by Supermap to their customers, with 30% of operational efficiency thanks to a complete digitization of the process. Going into other application, I chose this one in Turkey, Fatih. This is for food and beverage, where the customer wanted to have world-class traceability of the process, but by a full digitization, gain 15% of productivity and 15% of energy savings. I want to mention this example because when you speak about energy efficiency, very often the typical industries which are targeted are heavy industries. But 70% of the gain in industry is in light industry. And those gains are small projects and with a very, very fast payback. We spoke about motors this morning. Motors are 60% of the energy consumption in industry. And just by applying electronics control drives on them, you can gain 20 to 60% of energy efficiency with a payback which this time is less than 1 year. Okay? Another big energy consumption is about infrastructure. On water, that's an example in Mexico, where not only we manage or we help the manager of the network to depollute the water, but also gain a lot in carbon emission by saving on energy. I was talking recently at an IT conference where Bill Gates was saying that water is energy, and that's true. I mean, so if you are able to save on the process, then you can supply clean and efficient water to everybody. So I just want to conclude on 2 points. When we speak about efficiency, the massive digitization due to the Internet of Things is changing completely the equation of return. And that's really new technology that appeared in the past years. And when you embark on that, you start with energy saving, which is already offering 30% of savings on the payback. But the collateral gains are more productivity on your CapEx, because you can design faster and in a more efficient way. On your OpEx, imagine in most of the buildings when you have a problem, maintenance issues, people spend 50% of their time looking for the issue. If everything is connected, you gain on your OpEx 50%. So it changes the rules of facility management. Changes reliability by doing asset performance management. It changes safety because thanks to augmented reality, your operators can go into a machine without opening the machine. And of course, it changed the carbon footprint. So I just want to insist that it's not about a monomaniac focus on energy efficiency. It's efficiency at every level which is revisited by digitization. And I would like to finish by mentioning that the role there of government that we're speaking on the first panel is big. It's about incentives, regulation, audit requirements, carbon pricing, which we struggle still to put into place in many places, rethinking the things with the total cost of ownership, and a big topic about trainings and skills, because many of the disciplines I was just mentioning before were born in the past 5 years at scale. And the biggest scarcity we have here are people who can rethink processes by using them and deploy them on the field. So a big job creation opportunity on the top of it. And that's my last slide, I commit to it, but we need to realize that on the top of it, construction, which is the base of our cities, the base of our buildings, it's at the Jurassic age at the level of productivity. When you look at the level where the other industries have deployed productivity thanks to digitization, construction today is at the bottom of it. And we have, thanks to digitization, to rethink completely the thing and integrate already that 50% of the cost of engineering of a building is in the phase of engineering, which is largely neglected in many instances. And more so that while the whole industry is focusing on optimizing the cost of construction, 80% of the cost of the life cycle of a building on a city will happen after construction. So when you optimize for construction, the likelihood that you don't optimize for 80% of the cost is very high. So just wanted to share with you the excitement that we are at a time now happening of big technology transition, that those technologies are already existing, but if I would take an analogy, the episode 1 of the internet in the 90s was connecting people to people. The episode 2 of the internet is connecting people to machines on the environment. So in the field we are touching, which is energy efficiency of our cities, building and manufacturing, we are where we were at the internet of people, we are at the beginning of the 90s. There was no Facebook, there was no Google, there was no Uber, so expect a lot of innovation. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jean-Pascal, for sharing that perspective with us, and I hope we're going to distribute all of these slides, because there's a lot of material there, I think, for all of us. A lot of emphasis you put on the power of digitalization and what that opens up, and I'm sure we're going to get back to that in the discussion. You also said something very fascinating about that every CEO knows exactly to the decimal, you said even, what they spent on IT, but they don't know what they spent on what their energy expenditure is. Fascinating statement that I'm sure we're going to get back to also in the discussion, as I think also the IEA in their recent report highlighted the issue or the topic of energy management in companies, how important that is. But let's not jump immediately into the discussion, because we have our other excellent speakers. I will now move next to our second speaker, Mr. Henrik Henriksson, the CEO from Scania, also of course extremely important company known to lead in sustainability. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Okay, I belong to an industry and a sector that is using a lot of energy, one of the biggest energy users around, but we're also one of the biggest sectors when it comes to the CO2 footprint in the world. Transport, which is the ecosystem that I belong to with my company, is representing somewhere around 17 to 18% of the CO2 footprint in the world. So we are definitely part of the problem. But we want to be part of the solution, and as a company, we have changed our purpose. Our purpose used to be to build the greatest trucks and buses in the world. Now it is to drive the shift towards a more sustainable and fossil-free transport system. The challenge that we need to address is the following, and I think you all have seen the latest reports that have come about how we are performing when it comes to bending the curve for CO2 emissions in the world. Basically, the task is that we need to halve the CO2 emissions every decade. This is the challenge that we need to meet. We as a company, we have conducted a study where we have got valuable help from IEA as well, and that is what we call the pathway study. That resulted also in a white paper that I can recommend you all to download from our homepage, where we're actually describing how will we be able, as a sector, as an industry, to decarbonize the transport system up until 2050. And since we are in road transport, that has been our focus. And the study is looking into, as you can see, 3 different segments of transport and 4 different geographies. And what we can see is that there are different scenarios, but all these scenarios, and this is the good news, folks, all these scenarios are leading to a result where we can actually reach this decarbonization up until 2050. In some of these scenarios, maybe already around 2040. And they are all a mix of biofuels, electrification, and also hydro power. You can choose whichever of these pathways you want. We, however, believe that if we're going to reach this, we need to have a focus on here and now. We cannot talk about the perfect technical solution that will come sometimes in the future. And to be able to do that, we need to focus first on biofuels, renewable energy that we can use, and eventually around 2025 we will reach a tipping point when electrification for our type of heavier transport will actually make sense for our customers to invest in. And make no mistake, our politicians, they can legislate, and they are doing a fairly good job when it comes to that. When it comes to the targets, when it comes to emissions and energy efficiency. But if it doesn't make sense for our customers who are buying vehicles to run transport, and it doesn't make sense for their customers, many of you in here who are buying transport, to actually transform, nothing will happen. So it has to be a win-win-win. And that's why the biofuels will make sense now in the short term, and eventually when the cost for electrification comes into play, that will be the main driver. And eventually the whole transport system on road will be electrified one way or another. The way we look at it is that there are three main drivers that we at Scania is working on to try to drive the shift towards more sustainable transport. And you're happy to see that the first one here is energy efficiency. We talked then about making vehicles more energy efficient. You can do that by the engines, regardless if it is a combustion engine or an electrical engine. You can also do it by aerodynamics. But we sometimes forget the obvious. We can do it also by having longer vehicles. Scandinavia, where I come from, we allow vehicles that are close to 25 meters long, while for some reason it's not possible in Europe. We have the same road network, we have the same infrastructure, we have the same cities. Instead of 18 meters of vehicle with loading capacity, we have 25 meters. Simple things like this is also energy efficiency. When it comes to smart and safe transport, on the right-hand side here, back in 2011, Scania, we started to connect all our vehicles, which means that they have basically a built-in smartphone that is sending information every minute where the vehicle are, how they're performing, who's driving it, how much they are loaded. Unfortunately, there we can see that in Europe, which has the most efficient logistical system in the world, we spend around 6.7% of our GDP on logistics. Still, the average truck out on the European road is only loaded up to 60%. So each truck is running around with 40% waste. So if we start connecting by smart digitalization, we will be able to try to fill up that gap. And that is one of the quickest way to gain energy efficiency, but also to gain sustainable transport. Then in the middle, we have alternative fuels and electrification. Electrification will come, but there are some hurdles when it comes to heavier transport. It is not the battery technology as such, because that is going quicker than we could expect. However, the cost is not. Which is coming back to my point before, that if we want to really create a transformation, it has to make sense for the whole transport system. Our customers and our customer's customer. So there we will see a delay in implementation of this technology. It's also the infrastructure. Charging of these vehicles will be cumbersome, and the capacity of electricity might be there, but is the grid there? And is the grid in the right place? Meanwhile, what we need to do then is work with biofuels, renewable biofuels, which can be used in the rolling fleet. In our company, we decided back in 2015 that all vehicles, 100% of the vehicles that leave our factory should run on renewable fuels. Unfortunately, only 5% of our customers are using that opportunity. That is because there is lack of availability of these fuels, or there is no real urgency when it comes to the legislation from our policymakers. One example is that biofuels coming from bioethanol produced in East Africa or in Latin America is taxed heavily in Europe, and if we produce it locally in Europe, it is taxed like whiskey or gin. Makes it quite expensive, actually. I'm also a little bit tired, to be modest. I'm actually really tired of the debate we have on the political arena about that producing fuel from waste is complex. What is complex about taking wastewater and sewage water? All over the world, we have this golden asset that we're not utilizing in a good way. I will give you a KPI that you will never forget, and that is that if you take 600 toilets, you have enough energy to fuel one biogas bus for 1 year. And I think there is a lot of toilets out there. And if we talk about the first sort of fuel being energy efficiency, I think this is the number 0 fuel. Another thing is that we're using too much land to produce biofuels. That is also bull, because in Europe, for example, we use more land for golf courses than we do to grow renewable energy. So there is a lot of, unfortunately, alternative facts here. What I'm trying to say is that we need to embrace together how we will make this transformation, and that we can only do in partnership. Partnership between governments, partnership between companies, and partnership with stakeholders within, in my case then, the ecosystem of transport and logistics. If we work in this triangle, we will create the move. This is one example where we have to work with infrastructure as well. That is also part of the partnership. Electrical highways might be something that is coming. We know that in many countries, 80% of the transport is done on 5% of the road network. There are a number of biofuels that you can use. The good thing is that you can use them here and now, reducing CO2 with up to 90–95%. And you have them available in all of your countries. The wastewater for biogas, for example, or residual products from the forestry industry or the agricultural industry. You can pump that into the rolling fleet of the vehicles that you have in your country today. We have done this exercise, and I'm coming to the end here, just to show that it's possible. This is our own transport company that we use for our own internal logistics. We are a big transport buyer ourselves. And just to prove our point, we can see here that in the last 10 years, we have actually halved our CO2 footprint in ton kilometers, just by working with efficiency, longer vehicles, the load factor, and biofuels. If we can do a halving in 10 years, so can the industry. And I would push for this collaboration model. And just to give you one example here, this is the latest partnership we have created with some companies. And the one on the right-hand side is a fashion company. They don't buy a single truck from us, but they design logistical systems because they have a big inbound transport to the factories and a big outbound to all their store. H&M, a fashion brand. Now we're going through their logistical chain to see how we can decarbonize it. That is not our customer, it is our customer's customer. And I think this is how we work together to create the results. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Henriksson, for this excellent presentation. Again, sharing a lot of insights. You repeated many times, I think, don't forget the customer and the customer's customer as a perspective. And you had many other excellent examples. I wrote down, I hope I wrote it down correctly, 600 toilets is one biogas bus. That's quite an impressive statistics, among many others, but let's not get into that right now. We'll get back to many of your points, I'm sure. But now we go to our next speaker, which is Ms. Tuk Ji, and she is the chairman of ITRAMAS International, and the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much to Mr. Venthurst, the chairman of the IEA Governing Council. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. I'm coming here as the representative of ITRAMAS International, but a great part of my career was with the government of Malaysia, where I served as the Secretary General of the Ministry of Energy before my retirement in the year 2016. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll talk a little bit about what ITROMAS does. In fact, ITROMAS is a green energy solution provider in the area of renewable energy and energy efficiency. So in terms of RE, this company is building Malaysia's largest solar farm with a capacity of 150 megawatts at the moment. In terms of energy efficiency, we are manufacturing LED lightings, and it is exported to many countries in Southeast Asia and in Australia. We've heard over the past 2 days about the main themes of decarbonization, decentralization, digitalization, so I will not go too deep into the subject list to say that these themes are very important in the global efforts to address climate change and the global warming. A little bit about what we've been doing in Malaysia. This is only a snapshot of our green technology policy that was formulated in 2009. So this is a cross-sectoral policy covering the energy sector, the water sector, the wastewater sector, and the transport sector. However, before 2009, we had been having formulated many energy policies related to energy security, energy efficiency, and policies related to minimizing the effects on the environment as a result of energy policy. So this overarching policy was designed to cover areas related to industry, areas related to the market, capacity building, and education in the broad areas that I had just mentioned just now. What are the challenges in the promotion of energy efficiency in Malaysia? Ladies and gentlemen, before the oil price hike in 1973, before 2008, which saw the oil price increasing to USD 148 per barrel, we faced difficulties in promoting EE in Malaysia, and it is because of the gas price that was heavily subsidized. So that is a counter effort towards what we were trying to do, but when we were hit by the high oil price of 148 a barrel in 2008, Malaysia didn't have any other choice but to take drastic actions to remove the gas price subsidies. So over the last 10 years, we have reduced the price subsidies for power generation, and today the gas price is at ringgit 25.70. It corresponds to USD about 6 USD per MMBTU. This has certainly incentivized energy efficiency in the country, and we see more efforts on EE being promoted in an orderly manner in Malaysia. However, to scale up EE in Malaysia, the government needs to take the lead, and by way of leadership by example. So during my time, we had so many programs on EE related to MAP's minimum energy performance standards, energy audits, capacity building. We had also given out loans to industries to promote or undertake industrial EE in the country, but it was highly fragmented, and we are not able to see the scale of energy saving in the country. However, the government also has limited funds because we are restricted to budgetary constraints, so we need the private sector to come in to help to complement the government in its energy efficiency efforts, and we can see it through energy performance contracting. And in terms of the financial incentives that were given by the government over the years, we can see it is in terms of fiscal incentives, whereby the companies are given some tax waiver. We have also, under the Green Technology Financing Scheme, given interest subsidies of 2% for companies embarking on green projects in the energy, the water sector, industrial sector. We have also given out some rebates in the form of the SAFE program, the Sustainability Achieved via Energy Efficiency program that was introduced in 2011. And we can see that there are good developments in the area of energy efficient refrigerators, air conditionings, and energy efficient chillers. And the last initiative that I can mention today here is in terms of energy performance contracting. It was started in 2013, and we have ESCOs who are employed to conduct energy audits in government buildings. However, when we employed the ESCOs, they could only stop at doing energy audits because they don't have the capacity to really implement EE. So that's where we need the private sector to come in, and ITROMAS is one example of the companies that have embarked on EE in Malaysia. We had to tweak the EPC model a little bit, and we call it the Managed Services Module, whereby we undertake to replace the high sodium lights with LED lightings in municipal area, and we also undertake to maintain the lightings, the LED lightings, over an agreed period. However, what is the details of the MSN model? We need to have a product that is proven to be energy efficient, and it must follow some of the international protocol, and also provide a proof of concept. So the proof of concept enables the quantum of repayment to be mutually agreed upon between the owner of the building or the owner of the project and the developer. And a fixed service payment is worked out, and the client doesn't have to put out any capital in this case. So the important thing is really about financing. So I must say, in Malaysia, our lenders are also risk averse. They don't want to take any risk. So they want to have something that is sure over a period of time. So we looked at the IE model, the IPP model, whereby the utility will pay the IPP a certain amount over a period of years, but in this case, it is a fixed amount to be agreed upon over a period of time, and in this project, we're able to get the funding from the lenders. So the managed services module can ensure bankability of an EE project, as it assures a constant stream of cash flow over the agreed concession period. In this case, it looks like it's longer than what was said by our friend from Schneider. In this case, the concession period is 15 years. There are certain elements that we had to agree with the owner of the municipality, because they also want some sharing of the benefits, so we have to stretch the concession period a bit longer. And the value of the project is just roughly about 14 million, and we hope through this model that we can replicate more EE projects on a bigger scale in Malaysia. What we really want is the lenders must really buy this story that we are proposing and have the confidence to provide the funding. If we don't have the lenders helping us, I don't think developing countries like Malaysia can really undertake big-scale energy efficiency projects in the country. So with this, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. G, for this presentation. I think you showed very clearly, indeed, also how price matters, for the incentive to do energy efficiency, but you also showed how you designed this unique model which worked in your country and which might also be a great example for other countries as well. Okay, thank you for that. And we move now to our last speaker, and then we'll have again a more interactive part of the session, Mr. Andrew McDowell, the Vice President of the European Investment Bank. Please.
Thank you, Noel. Good afternoon or good morning, everybody. No, I promise I'm not going to take my 10-minute allocation. You'll be delighted to hear it so that we can open it up to more questions and answers. Really, I just want to thank Dr. Barole and indeed my fellow Irishman, Brian Motherway, for the organisation of today's conference, for the invitation, and in particular for the partnership that Dr. Barole announced this morning between the IEA and the European Investment Bank as the EU bank in establishing a new forum for international financial institutions to discuss their policies on financing energy efficiency and indeed other clean energy lending policies. The European Investment Bank is in the process actually of revisiting our energy lending criteria over the next 6 to 9 months. Traditionally, renewables has been the focus, but the big challenge now is how to make, in the same way as we did with renewables over the last 10 to 15 years, how to make energy efficiency an asset class. When we started financing offshore wind 15, 20 years ago, primarily in Denmark and the North Sea, we were about the only bank doing it. It was highly risky, it wasn't well understood, the regulatory frameworks were unclear, the policy supports were unclear, the technology was unclear. Now when you look at offshore wind in Europe, the banks are pretty much tripping over each other to finance the projects. We've now got prices down to pretty much market competing levels without subsidy in some jurisdictions. We have extensive securitization of the assets off banks' balance sheets to make financing much more capital efficient. We have very strong technical capacity within the commercial banks to do this, strong engineering capacity and understanding of the technical risks. So the big question for us is how do we learn from how we've developed renewable energy as an asset class and apply that type of thinking and that type of model to energy efficiency. So this forum that Dr. Barole has announced and that hopefully will meet in the spring to bring together all the international financial institutions, and hopefully our colleagues from the EBRD will be there, the World Bank, the IFC, the other regional development banks, the African Development Bank, the AAIB, and so on. There's a number of topics I think we can discuss that would be where we can exchange notes, exchange information, and exchange learnings. For example, how to get commercial banks to start lending into these markets. This is a difficult thing for commercial banks to work with. The projects are very small, the incentives are often split. The technical capacity often isn't there, and the regulatory frameworks are often insufficient. We've developed a suite of products at the EIB, where essentially we risk share with commercial banks on new portfolios of energy efficiency loans, both for SMEs and the private residential sector. We also offer them technical assistance under a program funded by the European Commission called ELENA. And we also provide cheap funding. So we have a package that we use to work with commercial banks to try and get them to take that first step into lending into energy efficiency, particularly for small projects in the building sector. But this is something we can share and we can work with other IFIs on. Green bonds. The European Investment Bank was the first issuer of green bonds in 2007, and we remain, in fact, the largest issuer of green bonds. Including energy efficiency in the green bond taxonomy has been challenging, extremely difficult, to make sure that investors in green bonds are comfortable with the definitions, with the methodology, with the reporting, with the monitoring, with the auditing of the use of the financing for energy efficiency. We have eventually overcome a lot of these hurdles, but again, it's something we can work with other IFIs on in terms of how to share that experience and how to learn from others in making energy efficiency a legitimate use of green bond financing. I'd love us to work together with the other IFIs on opening up other forms of securitization for energy efficiency. Green mortgages is an area where I think the international financial institutions can help develop energy efficiency as an asset class. We could clearly work together with the commercial banking sector on what the definition of green mortgages are. Again, how they're reported on, how they could be monitored, how they could be audited. We could even take risk on some of the first pilots, perhaps, for green mortgage securitization through green covered bonds or green residential mortgage securities, where the IFIs would come together to actually take some risk, therefore reduce the pricing of the funding of those, passing some of that benefit on to the end beneficiaries. Imagine a situation where we could collectively work together and knock 20, 30 basis points of mortgages that get this classification as green mortgages. It could be a very interesting product for the financial markets, particularly in an environment where banks already, particularly in Europe, are very eager to work out a way to get mortgage lending off their balance sheets. So this is something I think we could work together on. I think we could work together on how to open up the ESCO markets and the energy performance contracting markets in Europe and elsewhere. And you've mentioned this from your own country. I mean, so far the United States has really led the way in energy performance contracting. There's just economies of scale. They've had a very clear and consistent template in terms of the contracts, very strong public sector support. We've struggled in Europe on energy performance contracting in ESCOs. I'd say the market here is probably about a tenth of the size that it is in the United States. We need to design products together as a global system, I think, to build up this particular industry. We need to work together on technical capacity building. We need to work together on definitions. We need to work together on statistical and accounting treatment, which has been something that's been very problematic in Europe, and we've worked closely with Eurostat and tried to provide clarification for promoters on statistical guidelines, particularly for the public sector in terms of the on-balance sheet, off-balance sheet treatment of energy performance contracts. So this is something I think we could work on. We can also obviously collaborate with our partners on individual projects in individual regions. And again, we find ourselves often in the Western Balkans, in North Africa, in many African countries, almost competing sometimes with other international financial institutions. But yet we're all collectively too small to make a difference. We need to work together as a system in order to try and crowd in the private sector into energy efficiency financing. So we're very committed to this new partnership, Dr. Barol. We certainly intend to bring our stakeholders together, bring our technical experts together, bring our financial experts together to support this new initiative. We thank you very much for the leadership, for bringing our institutions together, and we very much look forward to perhaps reporting back to the fourth energy efficiency colloquium this time next year on the results of that partnership. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks a lot, Andrew. That was a very upbeat last presentation. Energy efficiency seems to be on the verge of becoming this famous asset class where we can invest in. And I even heard, maybe I miswrote it, but because I think you even said we can even take some risk. That was you don't hear that much from a bank, you know. We can even take some risk. So, okay, ladies and gentlemen, I probably misquoted, but I promised. I think we should open it up because we also have a distinguished audience. I'm sure you might have questions. I surely have some, but I will sort of try to fit them in as well in the discussion. We have microphones there. We have a hand there. Please. Maybe you can introduce you, what's your background? Yes, please.
Okay, so my name is Monica Frassoni. I am the president of the European Alliance to Save Energy, which is a business-led organization of which Schneider Electric and Danfoss, and among others, are founding members. And there are also some NGOs and members of the European Parliament. So very brief question. I think that you actually mentioned what is our main concern, and that is the possibility of connecting the dots. The investment, the green mortgage is there as a project for a long time, but in a lot of countries, for example, my own Italy, there is no demand. So green mortgages are there, but they don't really work. On the other hand, we have the problem of public authorities, both at national and local level, which are not able to actually enter effectively in the market. And there is a need to connect the possibility and challenges that for private investment of big companies like the one that you have on your panel can actually do in order to connect all these issues. So you have legislation, you have possibilities of financing, and you have business opportunities. How do we connect the dots in order to be able to change things?
Thank you. There was a question to Andrew, I guess.
To all, actually.
Oh, to all, okay. Does anybody have a specific question for Mr. Tricoire? Because I know he has to leave early, so I want to, if possible, I will still want to fit that in. Anybody have a specific question for Mr. Tricoire?
Thank you. It's David Shipworth from University College London and the Demand Side Management TCP. So it's a question relating to the value of data in electricity. So electricity is a wonderful power vector, but increasingly it's a very valuable data vector as well. What happens when the value of the data in electricity exceeds the value of the power, and we see business models change and new entrants coming in from the ICT sector like Amazon are now looking at doing, and Facebook and Google? How does that change the implications for energy efficiency once that becomes the dominant driver of investment?
Okay. I'll take one more and then we go to the panel. And then we can come back. Okay. Please.
Yeah. Good morning. My name is Stefan Büttner. I'm with the Institute for Energy Efficiency in Production, as well as Vice Chair of the UNECE Group of Experts in Energy Efficiency. And my question to Jean-Pascal, but also to the other corporates, is what is actually the status and the activities in terms of your own energy efficiency activities, so in your own manufacturing of your products, and whether it is actually really true that what many in the public perceive that finance is an issue, because we found that 70% of companies, manufacturing companies, are actually working exclusively with their own equity rather than needing money from anybody else doing efficiency stuff. And lastly, we are about to launch a task force for industry taking a lead in moving forward with energy efficiency and productivity potentials. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, great. So we start with Jean-Pascal, because I know he has to leave early.
I'm sorry,
Then we go to the rest.
I have to take a flight to Shanghai, and I'm sorry, I will have to... So maybe on the value of data on electricity, I don't know how to answer that, frankly. We already work a lot with ICT companies, because we've been working now for ages on the convergence of IT and OT. And actually, I don't think it's a zero-sum game. You combine digital has a fantastic power to break silos. So there are things that we do very well in collecting data, in ensuring real-time control loops, in having our own analytics, because this is our specialized vertical. And at the same time, we benefit from all the efforts that the other guys are doing for their own sector. Our company was the first one to develop an Ethernet-based architecture in '97. And from that choice, which was completely crazy at that time, we benefited from any innovation that was done by ICT telecoms in this field. And 5 years after, those systems were more competitive than the proprietary and the old systems. So for me, it's more a crossroad of interest on a combination of effort. And think about that, just the industry of efficiency is dying of non-collaboration. You have now an open database which is open to the end user, to your contractor, to the utility, to all the people intervening, so you can share and everybody brings something. We've got our factories, our Industry 4.0 factories. The plastic manufacturers are having direct access on our machines. They modify the dosage under our control, but they do it directly because they are better specialists. So sharing, collaboration, and participating together. So I don't know if I answer your question, but that's so on the question, I can speak about ourselves, but we use our own food, right? And we love it. I mean, because it's a good way to learn and churn what you do. So every 3 years we save 10% of energy just to take one of the savings, right? And you think that after that it's going to be finished, but you can always grind. You can always grind by adapting your process and your energy together. So, and it's super exciting for us because you learn a lot and you can develop new innovation based on that. It's 200 factories, it's hundreds of buildings that we have equipped, and we work on it and develop soft and things and analytics and AI on it. I don't know if that answers your question somewhere.
The question whether you do actually need external equity or...
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. I'm sure many places, yes, and especially all the public acquirers, buyers, municipalities and stuff. Otherwise, public organizations, sorry. But otherwise, companies, it's difficult to find a faster return than investing on efficiency. Right? When you speak about 3 years and it's measurable, and you know what you get. It's like quitting smoking. Not only you feel in better health, but on the top of it, it's good for your P&L, right? So, but it all depends on the future. Now, I would go back. The big problem, and it was mentioned several times, is that it's rather smaller projects. It actually qualifies into assets, which can be control systems, software, and those kind of things. But it's not recognized as much as a big project. And you don't inaugurate it with big speeches. And it doesn't capture the attention of, but it's the best investment. I mean, industry has been doing that for ages. Buildings don't do it because they are not used. There is that separation between building and operating. Sorry for that.
There was the first question about connecting the dots. Do you have any comments on
Connecting the dots come a lot to the IEA meeting, where we all meet coming from different walks of life and build pilots together. Try, experiment, and work together. When I'm saying that kind of meeting, other meetings, but all those crossroads that we thank you for organizing and coalescing are the places where you meet improbable people that do different things, and actually you realize they need you and that you need them. So that's the best thing we can do. Like Andrew has just decided to finance one of our big projects because it's not risky, and I thank him wholeheartedly. Okay.
Okay, well, great. Thank you, Jean-Pascal. Thank you so much for being with us. And have a good flight. Have a good flight to Shanghai. And take all the lessons with you to Shanghai, of course. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to continue our discussion. We still have some time to finish, and there were questions to the entire panel. So, Henrik, may I go to you, and then we'll take the rest of the panel, please.
Yeah, to try to answer some of the questions from the audience then, I think when it comes to connecting the dots, we have found a very useful way of working in partnerships. And I think partnerships is easy to say that you should do it, but I think you need to create within an organization, in this case a company then, a certain set of skills to do it, and certain set of principles on how to sort of prioritize and how to engage to really get results. So it's not just a discussion club. Unconventional partnerships, I think, is giving the best sort of results. We are trying to do it with maybe institutions, political arenas, but also looking very much at our customers, because that's where I think we can find good partnerships. And I think that is the way to connect the dots and do pilots. But at the same time, I'm sick and tired of pilots as well, because you have to go from pilots to sort of real stuff, and I think it's better that we try to sort of find proper projects to work with. But that would be my take on the connecting the dots. And without that, there's no results. When it comes to sort of doing a transformation of what we are doing ourselves, when it comes to our own sort of footprint, within Scania we have decided since way back to half our CO2 footprint in our production, and also the same in our logistical system. So basically trying to live as we preach. And we're not talking about energy efficient as such, but it's part of the CO2 reduction that we want to achieve. And then I think the final comment on the data, from our perspective also, I think we need to, sometimes we talk about digitalization, that like this super cool thing that we don't really know what to do with it. And of course we can create new business models, but I think the greatest assets we have found, at least, and we have collected we collect around 2.4 billion kilometers of data every month, and then from our industrial system as well, is to use that data to actually improve your own internal efficiency. And to give you one example, 2017 we had an EBIT margin of around 10.5% of the company, and we can trace back 0.4% of those. So instead of doing 10.1, we did 10.5, just because of digitalization efforts in our own internal efficiency. And I think that's where you gain most results quickly.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Ms. Guy, please.
In response to the issue about connecting the dots, from the government perspective, I think you need to have all the stakeholders in the various departments to really understand and appreciate energy efficiency before we can really have a big scale EE project in the country. Because I'm speaking from my experience in Malaysia, I was trying to drive a big EE project probably 5 years ago, and I had to go around to all the ministries to find out how much bulbs they have in the office. But I couldn't get that traction, because probably they don't really see the importance of energy saving then, because in government everything is paid by government, so probably the civil servants, they need to change their mindset, and we need to have some peer review of the energy consumption of each ministry. We have to do a bit of shaming of the ministries that don't embark on energy efficiency through behavioral changes. But more importantly, now we want to move to a new regime using LEDs, which can reduce the electricity bill by 50% at a minimum level. So that's where we need the private sector to come in and propose to the government, I have got a very good scheme for you, and that's how we are going to do it. And through that, the road project, the street lightings project, if we can prove it to the government that here we are, you can really save it, and you can save the environment, you can have a cleaner environment, I believe that we can scale up energy efficiency on a big scale in Malaysia through the modified modified services module approach. That's my take, and that's where we can join hands to reduce on our energy consumption and also save the planet. Thank you.
Okay, excellent, Ms. G. Andrew, you?
Well, just on connecting the dots. I think today's forum is about connecting the dots, and bringing together policymakers with industry and finance starts to connect a lot of those dots. I think on the, you mentioned the issue of green mortgages. That has been tried before. That's true in a number of different countries. Sometimes timing is very important. I think the timing is better. I can see two reasons why the timing is a lot better now. One, in Europe, under the European Commission Sustainable Finance Action Plan, there will be a lot more pressure, initially moral, political, but eventually regulatory pressure on asset managers to be holding certified sustainable assets in their portfolios, which will lead to a greater demand for certified green assets, green bonds, perhaps green mortgages. On the other side, for the banks themselves, it's going to be a lot easier to start certifying mortgages as being green because of national rating systems and energy performance certificates at the national level, which are gradually becoming a lot more sophisticated, a lot more credible, and a lot more harmonized. So I think that's two reasons why two big changes that are going to take place The third issue is obviously in Europe again in particular, the banks are undercapitalized and desperate to get a lot of these assets off their balance sheet and into asset managers. So sometimes it's about timing. Sometimes, 10 years ago, the time clearly was not right for this as an asset class. Now it is, and we need to connect those dots again to make it happen.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Andrew. This is an extremely interesting panel, ladies and gentlemen, and we could continue forever, but you also want your lunch, and we still have more meetings, so I think we should really, unfortunately, wrap it up. But not after I ask the panel one last question, because we also have an audience of policymakers here. So if you from the private sector, from business perspective, could say one thing that these government officials that are amongst us, policymakers, should do differently or better, what would that be? What's your message to the policymakers from your perspective, on energy efficiency, of course?
Yeah, on energy efficiency, I think I welcome a very sort of active role of the legislator, at least in our industry. We have just got a new CO2 legislation in Europe, and we welcome that. That's good. What I would like to see more of, though, and it's actually the same thing that's happening in companies, that we work in silos. And very much of the political work and the legislation work is made in silos. For example, now to get a CO2 emission for vehicles, I think you can see that in front of you, is fairly tangible. But it's all about it's from the tank to the wheel. There's no consideration whatsoever what you put into the tank. What I would like to see is more legislation in that case when it comes from well to wheel, for example. And I think in many different sectors, I think also when it comes not outside energy sector as well, or the transport, it is about thinking more sort of holistic, thinking more cross-functional, and not just looking at that as silo thinking. That is what I would ask for.
Okay, excellent. Ms. Guy, you have also experience in the government. So what's your main advice to policymakers on this?
My advice is to really look at energy efficiency as a fuel. Just like you mentioned, is the first fuel, or
very first fuel, according to Mr. Birol here. From first fuel to very first fuel.
Very first fuel. So instead of just looking from supply side in terms of energy planning, we should look at EE from demand side as input in the national integrated planning. So instead of building one more extra power plant, we can save energy and maybe reduce. We can defer the construction of additional power plant. I think we should look from demand side. Yeah. Thank you.
It's like the I don't know which person said that, that the safest and the cleanest power plant is the one you don't have to build. Yeah, that's exactly. And you have another advice actually also about naming and shaming. That was also what you mentioned before, So don't be afraid also to show when people are really making a mess out of it.
I think that's very important, the peer review. Peer review, shaming and naming is very necessary in order for the civil servants to back up. I'm speaking from my experience. Thank you.
Excellent. Andrew, your message to policymakers.
I think celebrate energy efficiency. Like you say, maybe it'd be a good idea for politicians to turn up at the ribbon cutting ceremony for the power plant that wasn't built. And it'd be a nice way to market.
Excellent. It's a wonderful way to wrap it up. You remember the famous guru Daniel Jurgen indeed said that the biggest problem of energy efficiency is indeed that for politicians, there's no photo op and there's no ribbon to cut, which there is for a power plant, but indeed the power plant that doesn't need to be built, you almost should, make a ceremony out of that. So maybe we should end it here with those words, but not after thanking again our wonderful panel here for a great contribution to this discussion. So please join me in a last round of applause for our excellent speakers.